my name is Alex Mosley, and this is my curriculum model presentation. I chose the Montessori method for my presentation. It was created by Maria Montessori in the early 1900s in Rome. She came up with it when she was working with children in insane asylums, and she found that some of the skills and techniques that she was using was really helpful with them, and they were eventually able to go and take the public school tests and were able to test at the same level as their peers. So she then wanted to take those skills and techniques that she had used with them and try them in the early childhood setting. So that's kind of how that all came about. The method didn't really come to the U.S. It was here a little bit in the early 1900s, and it didn't really stick around for very long, and then came back around the 1960s and was a little bit more popular, but again wasn't hugely successful here, and then in the 2000s really came back and is something that's seen pretty often now. It wasn't very popular in the early 1900s because of the lack of the teacher role. A lot of people here were not very fond of that, so that's why it didn't really stay very long. Montessori had 5 kind of key beliefs that she used in her curriculum. It was a scientific approach to learning, and then through children's spontaneous activity, they labored to make themselves into men. The third one was that mental development is the result of a natural, internally regulated force, and then liberty is the imperative ingredient that enables education to assist the complete unfolding of a child's life, and order is prerequisite to the child becoming an independent, autonomous, and rational individual. So those were 5 kind of key beliefs in her teaching method. She thought that between the ages of 3 to 6, children are intrinsically motivated to bring their chaotic inner world, as expressed through spontaneous activity, into order. So that was another kind of big part of her teaching method. Maria Montessori had a huge importance on the environment. She believed that the prepared environment provided an environment where a child could respond to his or her inner forces of growth without being stifled. She thought that the environment needs to focus on the child's activity toward the essential task of self-formation, and so she would observe her students beforehand to ensure that the appropriate correspondence between the child and classroom materials was present. She also named all of her teachers directresses. She didn't want to call them teachers because they weren't necessarily teaching the children per se. They didn't have a hands-on role in that. They were more directing them and providing them with appropriate materials and environments. So they were there to ensure the environment provides what individual children need for their own inner construction. Maria Montessori also believed that children's behaviors are innately driven, so extrinsic rewards and external punishments were considered not only unnecessary but harmful to the children because of their potential to disturb a child's natural development. Montessori also used a lot of didactic materials in her teaching. That was a huge part of it, and they were present in all of her classrooms to bring order to the child's perception of the environment. She wanted children to learn to self-restraint and learn to change chaos into purpose. So that was another thing that she really focused on. Montessori emphasized motor education, which she thought that children learned through the care of the classroom, and then sensory education and language education that they both learned through didactic materials. So the environment, which was key in her method, was kind of made up of several different rooms for the children. They had a sitting room, dining room, dressing room. They had like a garden outside, lots of outdoor space and activities. Everything in the classrooms was child-sized. She wanted there to be, furniture that was meant for children. Everything in there was designed for children to be used by children, so that way there were never any excuses of, the child can't do something on their own, they can't reach something's too big for them. It was all designed for children. She believed that education of this sense is the basis of intellectual development, and that's kind of where those didactic materials come back into play. The didactic materials were designed to develop a child's ability to differentiate qualities of color, form, size, texture. So they were carefully sequenced so that as a child moves from one material to another, they can compare and contrast those materials. They can see how one is bigger, smaller, how it feels different, how it's soft, how it's hard. So a lot of sense is going to play with the didactic materials also. Some of the challenges for the Montessori method that I found, for myself at least, would be the huge amount of preparation for the teachers. They have to make sure they have all of their child size equipment, all of the didactic materials, lots of sensory materials ready before the children even get there. They also have to spend a lot of time kind of observing the children so they know what materials they need. When they observe, they're assessing their development and where they need to go developmentally, and so they really have to watch that and know how they can provide materials to help the children reach the goals that they need without that kind of direct teaching. So also there is an extensive training that the teachers go through to be a true Montessori teacher. So I think that could be something that would be challenging. I would assume that's pretty time consuming. It could be expensive for the teachers, just a lot more training on top of all of the training they've already done to be a teacher. Also, a challenge could be that teachers are to let children lead the learning 100%, and I think a lot of teachers like to be a little bit more in control than that, and so it could be a challenge to really let the children be that in control of their learning and to take on that director's role rather than the teacher role. Also, a challenge could be if you have like a administration that is telling you children need to learn this, they need to be ready for this state test. Those goals could be hard to reach at the same time for every child in a Montessori program, since it's based on them leading their learning and learning at their own pace. So those are a few challenges that I found from researching the Montessori method. Some of the strengths of the method, I think, are that it is child-directed learning, and it focuses on teaching them responsibility and respect. So they're responsible for their environment, they're responsible for cleaning up, putting away, they're responsible for getting their food out, for setting the tables. So it really teaches them a lot of life skills that I think is really good for them. Also, responsibility, respect, I think it teaches them to respect their peers, their teachers, and that's also something very good for them to learn at such a young age. It allows children to learn at their own pace, which I think we all know is very important. Children don't do well when they're being pushed to do something that they're not ready to do. So with them leading their learning, they can take it as slow or as fast as they need, and they can learn new things when they're ready, so I think that's really good. Another strength is that it's very focused on the environment, and the students have some experiences that they may not have in a traditional classroom, just a lot of that, all the outdoor activities, the garden, growing things. They also get to, while they're growing in the garden, they are getting to see how food grows. They also are getting to, eat that food when it's done, so the show really helps them see what all their hard work does. And then I think another strength that could kind of go both ways actually would be the extensive training for the teachers. I think it's really good for them to have that training and really know how to use the Montessori method, and that will, if they can implement all of the ideas that Maria Montessori had in the way that she intended, I think that it's a really great teaching method. So some of the weaknesses that I found were going back to that preparation, so much preparation on the part of the teacher, so I think that could be stressful for them, and just a lot of time when they're not even with their students that they're spending preparing. The child size equipment could be hard to find or maybe expensive. Also, some children do learn better in a more structured environment, so there are some children that I think that could struggle in the Montessori method, but I think it's really great for a lot of kids. Also, just having that time to observe and assess every child while they're playing with those manipulatives and that didactic material, I think it'd be kind of difficult for the teacher to spend enough time really observing and assessing each child, so that would be just another thing that's going to be very time consuming for them. Also, some places use modified Montessori methods, which I think make it hard to understand what a true Montessori school is, and so some people I think get confused after seeing a modified Montessori. They may not use all of the things that Maria Montessori wanted them to, and they also, when it's modified, it may not work the way Maria Montessori wanted it to. So, the fact that people can modify that and change the effectiveness of it, I think, is something that makes it hard for people to understand what it is. So how is play supported in the model? The children are provided with play materials and allowed to manipulate those on their own and learn independently. Montessori really focused on the environment and having the rooms and the areas and materials for children to use at their own discretion, and so they can really go choose something, play with it, manipulate it. They can come to conclusions based on their play. The Montessori method is usually based on play. And then evidence of this that I saw in the Montessori program that I observed in was that they did have those materials available for children to play with. They used the mats and let them pick a set of manipulatives and play with those independently. They had a lot of other materials that they could use during free play. They did have free play scheduled into their daily activities, and so they always were going to have an option to do that every day. It didn't have multiple rooms like Maria Montessori had designed, but it did have multiple centers. They had an outside area, so all of those things were kind of emphasizing play. And they were also, a lot of their activities that we're doing were presented playfully to the children. They were writing, but they were using, making rainbow lines to kind of teach them how to draw a straight line, and they thought that was fun. They were doing an art activity that was very teacher-led, but it was still fun for the children. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, so a lot of play was seen in the classroom. And then the integration of play that I learned from this, or how to integrate play, I guess, into my professional career, I learned from the Montessori method that it is possible for children to learn independently and without complete direction from the teacher. I think a lot of times, at least when I was in the classroom with children, with preschoolers, I thought that, I needed to create learning experiences for them and create play activities, but children can really do that on their own. It's kind of what they're built to do. When children are provided with appropriate environments and materials, they will learn to be responsible for that environment and learn to use materials in the way that they were meant to be used. That's huge in the Montessori method, and I think a really good kind of tip to take with me that, when children are held responsible for things, then they do, a lot better with that, and they can be responsible, and they can clean up, and they can be responsible for their environment. Children can be in control of the classroom. It doesn't always have to be the teacher, so they can be leading the activities, leading their learning, can really be in control of a lot of things, which I think is something that we can all learn and kind of take with us, that, we can let children do a lot more than we think they can. I think also a big thing that we had already talked about, through the readings and stuff, but the process is more important than the product a lot of the times. When children are, playing, they're learning, they're exploring, they're really focused on what they're doing, how they're doing it, not how am I going to do this to make what the teacher told me I needed to make. So, and that's also very apparent in the Montessori method. Children learn through manipulating and exploring, and they have to be given the opportunity to do these things and come to conclusions on their own, so we need to just let them do, and they will, really learn a lot of things at the same, pace and rate that if we would have just been presenting that information with them. And it's a lot more fun when they do it on their own. They're really proud of themselves, so I think if we let them kind of explore on their own, they will come to conclusions and learn things and be so excited when they do learn those things. And then I think the last thing is probably just to let children take the lead, and you'll be surprised at all they can do and learn. We really should, trust that children want to learn. It's what they do. They love to explore. They love to learn new things, so we should just let them do that. So that is my presentation on the Montessori method. A lot of my information came from the Curriculum Models in Early Childhood Education by Stacy Goffin and Catherine Wilson. So that's where a lot of this information came from. please post your questions and comments, and I'll do my best to answer all of those and get back to you. Thanks for watching.